The whisper came without warning. Genesis 6, verse 3. 6 words buried in the genealogy of Adam, so easy to miss you could read them 10 times and never stop. My spirit will not contend with humans forever. Their days will be 120 years. God had just signed the death warrant for an entire civilization. And somewhere in the ancient world, one man heard it and began to build. Noah was 500 years old when the vision came. He would be 600 when the first drop of rain touched the ground. For 120 years, longer than the entire lifespan of most empires, he carried a warning that made no sense in a world that had never known rain and built a vessel that defied every law of reason. The earth in those days was not what we think. Genesis is unsettlingly precise about what had gone wrong. The sons of God saw the daughters of humans and took them as wives. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, the heroes of old, men of renown. The text reads like a breach in reality itself. Something cosmic had broken open, and the corruption was total. Every thought of the human heart was only evil all the time. The Hebrew phrase is kol hayom, all day, every day, without pause. The text says, God regretted making humanity. It grieved him to his heart. And then, in the middle of that darkness, one sentence breaks through like a shaft of light. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. This is the hinge of the entire story. One man who walked differently. One family that refused the corruption. And so God laid out the impossible blueprint. Gopher wood, 300 cubits long, 50 wide, 30 high. A single window above, a single door in the side, pitch inside and out, and 43,800 sunrises to finish the work. The Hebrew word for the wood is gopher, a term that appears nowhere else in the Bible, in no other ancient text, in no known language family. Scholars have argued for cypress, for cedar, for a lost species, but the ambiguity is not a translation problem, it is a signal. Noah was not working from human timber knowledge. He was working from divine specifications, and the tree itself belonged to a category we no longer have words for. Imagine the isolation. Picture a man building a vessel the size of 1.5 football fields, hundreds of kilometers from any sea, in a world where precipitation did not exist. Genesis 2:6 tells us the earth was watered by a mist that rose from the ground. Rain was not a thing. No one had ever seen it. Noah was constructing an ocean liner for a flood in a world where the very concept of rainfall was alien. Every morning for 120 years, he woke up and picked up his hammer while his neighbors picked up their laughter. And yet, here is where the archaeology begins to speak. At Tel Farah in modern Iraq, the ancient Sumerian city of Shuruppak, excavators uncovered something that stopped them cold. A thick, sterile band of water-deposited clay, nearly half a meter deep, cutting cleanly through the occupation layers. Below it, early dynastic artifacts. Above it, a completely different material culture, dated to roughly 2900 BC. The clay layer at Shuruppak is not a metaphor. It is still in the ground, and it is still telling the story. In the spring of 1929, Sir Leonard Woolley was excavating the royal tombs at Ur, one of the oldest cities in human history, when his workers hit a layer of perfectly clean, water-deposited silt, nearly 3 meters thick. Woolley descended into the trench, examined the layer, and turned to his team with a single sentence. "We have found the flood." The telegram he sent to the British Museum became front-page news across the world. Woolley was right about the event and wrong about the scope. The Ur and Shuruppak flood layers are real, but they describe a regional deluge in the Tigris-Euphrates Valley. Catastrophic for the people who live there, but not global. The biblical flood, if it was limited to Mesopotamia, would still have been the end of the world for everyone who knew the world. And for that, the evidence points north, toward the Black Sea. Toward a catastrophe so immense it rewrote the geology of an entire basin and planted itself in the memory of every civilization that survived it. For most of human prehistory, the Black Sea was not a sea. It was a massive freshwater lake, cut off from the world's oceans, its surface sitting roughly 150 meters below sea level. Around the lake's shorelines, Neolithic farmers built villages, planted crops, raised livestock. They were among the earliest agricultural societies on Earth, and they were living on borrowed time. As the last ice age ended, global sea levels rose. The Mediterranean crept higher, and around 7,600 years ago, during the Neolithic, when humans were keeping records in one form or another, the narrow land bridge at the Bosporus could no longer hold. It collapsed. The Mediterranean burst through. Marine geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman, publishing in 1997, calculated that water thundered into the Black Sea basin at a rate of 50 cubic kilometers per day. The force of 200 Niagara Falls, every single day, for months. The shoreline retreated by up to a kilometer each day. Picture waking up, walking to the water's edge as you had done your entire life, and finding it had moved 1,000 meters since yesterday. Picture doing that again the next day, and the next. Every village, every farm, every ancestor's grave along the coast was swallowed in silence. The survivors fled inland and uphill. They carried nothing but children, memory, and the beginning of a story that would echo for 4,000 years. The sediment cores pulled from the Black Sea floor do not lie. They show a razor-thin transition layer, geologically instantaneous, where the fossilized shells of freshwater mollusks are violently replaced by saltwater species. Above the boundary, marine life that came from the Mediterranean. Below it, the quiet, freshwater ecosystem of the ancient lake. The world of the Black Sea did not fade away. It drowned. And the people who survived that catastrophe remembered it long enough to write it into Genesis, into Gilgamesh, into the ancestral memory of over 200 distinct cultures. This is what changes everything. The Genesis flood is not a story invented by priests to scare people into obedience. It is the theological interpretation of a real geological cataclysm, preserved by people who experienced it, transmitted across 4 millennia of oral tradition, and finally written down in Hebrew by scribes who were asking not, did the flood happen? But what was God doing through it? The archaeology and the theology are not enemies. They are two languages describing the same event. The Sumerians recorded Ziusudra, the wise king warned by the god Enki to build a boat and save the seed of life. The Babylonians preserved Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh, Tablet 11, where the hero seals his vessel with pitch, rides out a 6-day storm, and releases a dove, a swallow, and a raven in sequence, identical to Genesis. The Greeks had Deucalion and Pyrrha. Hindu texts preserve the story of Manu, warned by a fish that a great deluge was approaching. The Maya, the Aztecs, the Hopi, every civilization that survived the ancient world kept a flood story alive. The Gilgamesh parallel is too precise to be accidental. Utnapishtim's boat lands on Mount Nimush, Noah's on Ararat. Both heroes send out 3 birds in the same order. Both offer a sacrifice when the waters recede, and both receive a divine promise. 1 catastrophe, 2 theological traditions. The borrowing runs deep because the memory runs deeper. Before Genesis was written, before Abraham left Ur, the story was already ancient, carried out of the Black Sea basin by refugees who became the ancestors of civilization itself. But what of the vessel? A wooden ship buried in the Anatolian highlands for 5 millennia would, by every law of archaeology, no longer exist. Wood rots, insects consume, time erases, and yet the search has never ended. The Durupinar Formation, a boat-shaped geological feature perched in the mountains of eastern Turkey near Mount Ararat, measures 157 meters in length, nearly identical to the biblical 300 cubits. Ground-penetrating radar surveys in the 1980s and 1990s detected subsurface layers with regular geometric patterns that do not match natural geology. Geologists insist it is a natural formation, a syncline, a fold in the rock. Perhaps they are right, but the ancient texts give us a clue that keeps the search alive. The Atrahasis epic and Genesis both describe the vessel sealed with bitumen, natural asphalt, inside and out. Bitumen was the petroleum product of the ancient world, and unlike wood, it can survive for thousands of years chemically intact. Ancient bitumen artifacts from Mesopotamia sit in museums today, still black and viscous after 5 millennia. If Noah's pitch is still embedded in the soil of eastern Turkey, it is chemically distinguishable from natural asphalt. and it is waiting to be found. Genesis 7:11 uses a phrase that has mystified scholars for thousands of years. On that day, all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were open. The Hebrew word is tehom, the primordial deep, the waters of chaos that existed before God spoke creation into existence in Genesis 1. The flood is not being described as a weather event. It is the uncreation of the world. The same waters that God separated and held back on day 2 are now being released back onto the earth in a deliberate reversal. And the springs of the great deep may be the most scientifically resonant phrase in the entire narrative. The Black Sea deluge was not caused by rain falling from the sky. It was caused by a natural dam breaking, water from the Mediterranean abyss bursting through the Bosporus land bridge. The Hebrew text describes a geological catastrophe using theological language because that was the only language its authors possessed. The earth opened. The deep gave way. A freshwater basin filled with salt water and violence. And the world of the Neolithic farmers on those ancient shores was erased forever. When the waters finally receded and the ark came to rest, God did something that is easy to overlook. He said, "Never again will I curse the ground because of humans." The ground, the Adama, the same soil from which Adam himself was formed, had been under a curse since Eden. Thorns and thistles, labor and sweat. The flood lifted that curse. Creation received a reset. The earth had passed through the waters, had been cleansed, and had emerged renewed. The rainbow was not just a promise about future floods. It was the signature on a new covenant between God and the ground itself. What the geologists unearthed, what the archaeologists excavated, what the sediment cores preserved, none of it proves Genesis is a science textbook. It proves something more significant. It proves the biblical authors were not inventing fairy tales. They were keeping memory. Real people fled real water. Real generations passed real trauma to their children. And when the Hebrew scribes finally wrote it down, they were not asking whether a flood happened. Everyone already knew a flood happened. They were asking why. What was God doing through it? The archaeology and the faith do not cancel each other out. They complete each other. And that is the story beneath the story, the history behind the history, that echoes of antiquity untold exist to tell. 120 years of building, 150 days of water covering the earth, 4,000 years of memory carried through the generations. And now the ground itself has begun to speak, through clay layers at Shuruppak, through sediment cores from the Black Sea, through ancient tablets that preserve the same sequence of dove and swallow and raven. The flood is not a myth buried in Scripture. It is an event buried in the earth, waiting for us to find it. And we are just beginning to dig. If this is the kind of story you've been searching for, the history behind the history, the evidence beneath the text, the echoes that have been ringing through the earth for millennia, then you are in the right place. This is Echoes of Antiquity Untold. Hit subscribe so you do not miss the next one. I will see you in the caves.